tonight. I'd like to thank Terry Powell and welcome Terry Powell. He's an archaeologist, former archaeologist, and he's the co-owner of Tools from the Earth. He creates reproduction, Stone Age, and Native American tools. His reproductions are in high demand, and his clients are historic sites, museums, educators, collectors. And I believe, Terry, your website said that some of your tools were used in the IMAX Lewis and Clark film. Is that right?
No.
No. Okay.
But I'll explain that.
Okay, that's good. And he did tell me today that he just finished an order of Paleo Indian tools for the Stanton County Museum in Johnson, Kansas. He'll have to tell you how long ago those Indians lived. So if you want to read more, be sure and check out his website, toolsfromtheearth.com. And as you know, most of us don't have the opportunity to see these tools close up and personal, and so I'm excited to welcome Terry, and thank you, Terry.
I was an archaeologist for 20-some years. And archaeologists find just pieces of tools. They're called artifacts. And you never really get to see what the whole thing looked like. You find a stone point. Well, that was always attached to a wooden handle, a wooden shaft, or something like that. And in eastern North America, and even most of Kansas, those things rot away. The only time you're going to see the whole tool after several thousand years is if you go out in the Southwest, where it is very, very, very dry, and the handles and even the string and everything else has been preserved. So you pick up an axe head, you're digging, you find this axe head, and you know that axe had a handle on it. And so I got, gee, I wonder how the axe head was made. I wondered if they worked at all, or how well. So for the last 40 years, I've been playing around with those things and trying to figure that out. And now I have come up with most of my tools can be used. Chopping wood with stone axes. I've had school children when I was at a nature center, directing a nature center, giving school programs. I had kids come up for a program on this, and thousands have used some of these things for chopping wood. So, okay, Lewis and Clark. I got a phone call one day when they were making the film for their, what was it, the bicentennial? I guess it was, okay. And they wanted some bison scapula hose. They found out I made those. And I said, sure. So I made some of those. I made something else, and they shipped it off. They made the film, and at that time I was in Florida. And happened to be at a place that had an IMAX film theater, because it was an IMAX film. So we went, and we watching and watching and watching and watching and watching, and then we saw the credits, and my wife turns to me and she says, honey, I'm afraid you fell on the cutting room floor. And so is the movie. That's one of the things in the movie business. So I made the stuff, but I didn't make it into the film. And there was a lot of other stuff too. Some people spent long days making teepees, and I found out from them they weren't in there either. So that's the movie business. Okay. All right. People have been in North America, archaeologist tells us, for at least 10,000 years. And these people came from Asia. Okay, and we know that because we have dug up some of these skeletons, and people from that part of Asia have some very distinctive things on their skulls that tell us these are from these type of. And these differences are the front teeth here, called incisors. They are shovel-shaped. Ours are pretty flat. On the back of the skull, these people have, we have, what is it? One, two, we have one bone back here and two or three bones. Anyway, they have a lot more bones in the skull than anyone that has a European heritage. Okay, so we know that that's, and there are a lot of other things also. So we know that all of these Indian arrowheads and things that we find right here in Kansas, these people's ancestors came from Asia. Now, these people, Native Americans back at that time, several thousand years ago, they couldn't do a genealogy because they didn't write, and they didn't write because they didn't have an alphabet. Okay? So they learned everything from grandma, grandpa, mom and dad, aunts and uncles, and everything was told to them. Okay? And so I want to start off with a tool here that we find parts of. Many of you have probably found arrowheads like this. You probably have some of them. And these were not arrowheads. They're too big, too big. Arrowheads are the things that you all probably call bird points. Okay? These points are way too big for the early bow and arrow. They're too big and heavy. They just sort of fall down. These are spear points, okay, on small spears, okay? And these spears were not thrown by the hand. They had an ingenious tool called a spear thrower. It's also known by the term atlatl, which is an Aztec word for spear thrower, because when Cortez, the Spanish person, came into to Mexico and trying to steal all of their gold, the Aztec Indians had short spears and spear throwers, and they were almost penetrating the Spanish chain mail. Not the armor, but all those little circle things, you know. And there are many, many, many different types of spear throwers. Here is a very typical Eastern United States spear thrower. Has a hook made out of a deer antler, has a weight made out of any kind of stone, and the spears have a little depression in the end, and that little hook's there, and you threw this just like you threw a baseball, okay? And this size is perfect for a deer. And if you had somebody you were upset with, they would work fine on them too. But this was basically a hunting tool, okay? And we find these, the points, when you find a point like this, a Pawnee didn't make it. These are very old. These are several thousand years old. And then eventually, oh yeah, yeah.
And what kind of rock are they made from?
Flint, chert, the same stuff. Yeah, yeah. Okay. So most of these are very old. And then someplace along the line, the bow and arrow was invented, and everybody adapted to the bow and arrow. It didn't take as much skill. And you could use it in tighter spaces. If you're in the woods, you got this long stick here. You need a lot of space to, be able to throw this thing. So bow and arrow became the tool of the day, and these went out of use. The only people who used the atlatl and these spears were the American Eskimos, and they used those even after they got guns from the white people, because they use a bigger spear because they were spearing seals and walruses, and I think they liked I'm not sure, but I think that they had the harpoons and they tied a cord to the head, and I think that was an easy way to get something that poked his head up out of the ice and then went down. They still had it, so I think that's why they still use the harpoon and the spear thrower. Okay, and there's all kinds of styles of these. Some of the Eskimo spear throwers look like 2x4s, and Australian Aborigines had all different styles, and but this is a typical Eastern style. Now, just a piece of technology here. This is stone, and this is a counterbalance weight. They knew a lot of physics, only they couldn't spell it or write it. Because the spear out there is heavy, with all way out there, all that weight, and if your weight starts wobbling around, and if they put a weight on the back here, that helped counterbalance it. Okay, so it balanced, made it easy to be more accurate. Okay, so, and they made these out of stone, all different types of stone. They even made it out of quartz. And if any of you know anything about stones and the hardness scale, quartz has a hardness of number 7. Diamond is 10. So quartz is really hard, and that's what all your sand is made out of, but they still drill those holes. So how did they drill those holes? Well, Black and Decker, you know, hadn't been invented yet. And they used the most ingenious way. They used sand as their grit, and I've made up, I'm making one of those stones, and I just wedged it between a stick, and I do everything on the ground. I put my foot on this, and I'm about 3/4 of the way done drilling this hole. And most of the unfinished stones that we find have this central core of stone in there, and that tells us it was drilled with a hollow stick, a piece of bamboo. Well, they didn't have bamboo here, they had cane. Bamboo is a close relative of cane, okay? And almost all of these unfinished ones that we find were drilled with hollow sticks. So why were these things drilled with hollow sticks? Do you know? You don't know.
Put the sand in the middle as a container for the grit.
Well,
down the shaft, right?
Well, that jams things up a lot. So, what if you think about, you know, everybody, as little work as possible. If a solid stick will make the same hole as a hollow stick. But if you use a hollow stick, you're only drilling out half of that stone, and the other half is this center column inside, and it just breaks off and falls out. So it can be theoretically twice as fast because you're only drilling out half of the stone. So, and then you grind these down and make it smaller. That's way too big, but I thought I might go off to one side. I may have to make a correction. Anyway, so a very ingenious way of getting a job done. And frankly, with the stuff they had, that was probably the most elegant way of doing it. Elegant in terms of the simplest way to do a good job. And so, you know, they were doing this a few thousand years ago. Now, making the, you know, drilling quartz with quartz. one made out of a soft limestone or a soft steatite like this here. A pocket knife will scratch this. You know, I didn't want to spend hours and hours. They all will perform the same job. So what we think is, if you can say, well, I made mine out of quartz, that's just like saying, well, I paid $10,000 for that set of rims on my car there, you know? And it probably had something to do with just showing your status or how industrious you were, because it would take a long time. Anyway, so whoa. There. So, a very good tool. This was at one time a willow tree, a sapling, nice and straight, but I still spent quite a few hours in straightening it out. And all you need is a little campfire. And if this thing is bent this way, you hold it over the fire, and then you bend it the same amount in the opposite way, hold it until it's cool, and if everything turns out all right, it springs back straight. So this is the first thing I ever straightened. So I didn't have any kids then, and so BC, I wanted it really straight. So I spent probably 5 or 6 hours on it. You know, I wouldn't spend that on it today. I know how, and I would rub Crisco in it, heating it over the stove, and I did this probably 30 years ago, 40 years ago, 30 years ago, and it has not went back at all. So I think all that oil cooked in there helped it stay nice and straight. So that's all stuff that they could do. With sinew, and I use hide glue, which is made by taking pieces of dried animal skin, boiling it, and the stinky foamy stuff that comes up is the hide glue, and you skim that off and save that. And it's really strong stuff, and I mixed charcoal in it, which it just gives it a better bonding agent. And sinew, which is the tendon that attaches animal muscle to bone, and it's super strong. Wild turkey feathers glued on with the hide glue and tied with the sinew. So they had everything that they needed for making a very strong piece.
So
yes,
you
ma'am.
make your own glue then?
No, I don't.
Oh, okay.
Darn, somebody would have to ask that.
Look at all your products then. I mean,
I go to Dillon's, Walmart, and buy my hide glue. Telling all my secrets here now because she asked this question. You go to the aisle that has gelatin, and you buy Knox unflavored gelatin. The same thing.
really?
Exactly the same thing, only this is a food-grade hide glue. If you are a vegan, you will not eat Jell-O. You know it comes from animal skins and hooves and all that kind of stuff, okay?
I'm not sure about eat Jell-O anymore at all.
It's okay. Better than some of the other things you might be eating, okay? Okay, so if you want some hide glue, there you go, just not too far away. In fact, Walmart sells this stuff in a big box of these small boxes. I don't know what, I guess there are a lot of people who still make their own Jell-O molds and stuff. I don't know. So, but the secret, if you want to use this as a glue, you don't mix a whole bunch of water in it. A little bit, and then you heat it up in a tuna can and stir it up bubbles, and that helps sort of strengthen it and make it sort of thick. Apply it. It dries about as fast as some of these fast-drying glues, and it is tough stuff. The early furniture makers here in the United States, back in the 1700s, they put their cabinets together with this stuff. And that was quite a few years ago, and much of that furniture is still strong, and it's good stuff.
Does it become like waterproof?
No, it is not waterproof, so you can't be using this out in the rain. Yeah, so if you want waterproof stuff, then you go find a pine tree, or there are some other trees that have saps in them that you can heat up, apply it, and stick something together, and those things are waterproof. Okay? This isn't. So, you know, you don't want to be hunting out in a rainstorm. No, you don't want to glue a fish hook on a piece of string with this stuff. It isn't going to work. Okay. Yes, hadn't I? The other thing that most people use is an axe. Okay. Well, starting off, I don't know, about 7,000 years ago, people used stone axes like this. They wrapped a handle around the stone head. Now, some of them have a groove all the way around. If you've ever been to Mesa Verde or some of those places, they have stone axes that the groove goes all the way around. And at Mesa Verde, they have some of their axes out there that still have the handles on them. And they took a long, skinny stick, and they wrapped it around twice, brought it down, and tied it, and it's a fairly crude handle. Okay, then they went to making a flat spot there to put a wooden wedge in there, and I just don't have a wedge in there. And then wrapping the handle around there. So some of these early axes were just pretty crude axes, but they worked. Okay, this is a string I made from the inner bark out of a willow tree. So, and that holds up to water well.
Gary, were
Yes.
these axes used to chop wood, or
Yes.
were they used to?
Were tools. These tools.
They weren't war tools then.
No. Contrary to that program on the Discovery Channel. That aired, what, last year, about the Incas or somebody in South America. They had this program that the guy that was hosting the show and one of the natives there, they had these big stone axes on ends of sticks and had all these vines wrapped around, and they were having this battle. Well, my friend in Illinois made those axes, and those were wood cutting axes of the Inca. They were not battle axes, because by the time you got that heavy thing swung around and then tried to bring it back again, you probably had the other guy's axe in your face. They weren't good battle tools, and they were woodworking tools. Okay, and these were too. And that red stuff on there is not blood. Yeah. So then, as times went on, the natives, especially around Cahokia Mounds, anybody ever heard of that? Near East St. Louis?
I've been there.
Huge mound down there, lots of big mounds. Those Indians made a fort around the inner part of the bastions on it, where they could shoot from. They rebuilt that fort 3 times, and I think the circumference of it is over, I think it's a half a mile around, and the posts in those things were like this. So there was somebody cutting down big trees all the time. Now, by the time you get to big trees, you don't use an axe. That's too much work. You build a little fire around it and maybe take your axe and chip out the char, and then it burns, and you chip out the char, and finally it falls over, okay? But for smaller ones, you use these axes, okay? Now, so they went to a new technology, and they made an axe that's called a celt. You cut a hole in your axe head, and you wedge the head in there, okay? And so there is no groove in this axe. It's just wedged in there. Now, any of you who have ever split wood, you know wedges split wood. Okay? Well, I knew that, but the first handles I made them fit nice and perfect all the way around, and they lasted 10 minutes. And I thought, gee, you know, there's something wrong here. So finally, you have to think out the physics of it. A wedge splits wood because it's pressing out on the sides. So I left daylight on the sides and only wedged the top and the bottom. And I had no more problems then. And I'm sure that's what they did, because all of my other friends who make axes, they put daylight on the sides. And this axe handle I made in West Virginia out of elm, and it's probably, I don't know, many years old. I'm on my third handle on this axe head here, and I made the axe head probably 30 years ago or so. So this is called a celt, and you find celt heads from this big. I've seen them this big from the Cahokia area. Now, who would swing an axe head that big? Well, maybe they didn't swing it much, because if you study the Australian Aborigines, they had axes like this, but they also had these really big axes. And since their culture went on, you know, that they were using stone axes up till 1900 or so, anyhow. And what they did with these big axe heads is they put little short handles on them, and they used those for splitting mauls. And they would lay a log on the ground and straddle it and bring it down, split pieces off of a big log. Okay, so perhaps that's what they use these big ones for. We don't know. And then if you go to Florida, North Carolina, you can't block it that holds an edge. Sandstones and limestones, you don't have anything for making axes out of, or anything that you want a sharp edge on. Well, these people were very ingenious, so they went to what I thought the next best thing. And since I spent 17 years in Florida, I got well acquainted with shell tools. Okay, so if you live on the southern tip of Florida, that's your axe head, piece of shell. And this is out of the queen conch. If you've ever eaten conch fritters, conch soup, you've eaten the queen conch. And that pink, and you see these in roadside stops, they have this big pink lip on them. And that's what this is. And some of them get much bigger. Then, but those types of snails only occur in the Bahamas and the extreme southern tip of Florida. So they had other snails up along the coast of Florida. You might call this a conch, but it's really a whelk. And they broke off this skinny, thin piece here, and they pecked a hole in the end and pecked a notch here and broke some of this off, shoved a stick in there, wedged it in there, and this is really a wood chopping machine right here. You've got the, oh yes. Now, what's the secret? Well, I started using very thin shells, and they just break. So you want to find a snail that has some age on it, and you know, some of us from experience, the older you get, the thicker you get, and so that's what you want. You want a nice thick shell, and this is. So you bring in the physics here. Again, a very narrow, sharp edge here with a whole bunch of weight behind it. And I made these wooden bowls here with all shell tools. So I may use some stone on them, but pour them out with tools like that. Okay. This one I didn't get done because you gotta use green wood with shell and stone tools. You can't have it dried out. Won't work well. Okay. So this one I did, but then I didn't pick a real good piece of wood either. So I've got a few things to learn. Shell tools. Here's a chisel. This is the central column, not from this snail, but from a snail called the horse conch, and they get big. So you beat away all this stuff and just end up with the centerpiece sharpened up, and use a mallet, and very well too. Another woodworking tool is an adze, okay? This is a very small stone adze, and you find these big. It all depends what you're making, you know. So, but on the coast, they didn't even have a small piece of stone like that. So here is a shell adze, and this is a tool that you use this way for shaping wood. So I use this on the inside some. I use this for a lot for, shaping the ends, but some for the inside also. And these work very well. Let's see. I think that's about the only shell tools, but those are the main woodworking tools. Now, also in Florida, they have shark tooth knives. They look this way because there was a site down there off of Marco Island where the prehistoric people had thrown a bunch of this stuff in a mucky pond. And the muck down there preserved the stuff, just like the dry air preserves stuff in the Southwest. So they found wooden masks that still had the paint on them, rolls of shark skin that were probably used for sandpaper, wooden bowls. They found over 1,000 wooden items, and many of the wooden items were these very long, skinny-handled shark tooth knives. And I finally figured out why they put these long handles on them, and that was so you could put two hands on and you've got all kinds of control. So to finish the end grain on this, I used this here, and it really worked beautifully. I used no sandpaper on this, okay? And so anyway, that's another nice tool.
Does that have to be green wood also to use the shark tooth on it?
It works best, yeah. It just works so much faster and easier. And so you gotta be a very knowledgeable worker of wood and know what types crack easily and ones that don't. Oak is known for cracking, but I just picked up a piece, and this is, I don't know what it is. It might be sweet gum, and you know, it doesn't have a crack in it. So anyway, a lot to know in making stuff. Here's adze I made, tiny stone. I just this is a branch off of a tree. There are some peoples in the northwest coast made these things this way. Again, I made my own string out of bark from a willow tree. Let's see. Let's go to something like this. Deer jaw on the end of a stick.
Cool.
It's cool, but what the heck did they use this thing for, you know? Well, anybody know?
Scraping hides?
Scraping hides. Good guess, but no. A saw. Close. Yeah.
Chisel.
A saw is the closest thing. These are called grass sickles. And when you find them as an archaeologist, they have all these grooves cut down in between the teeth, and it's polished and worn down. And through some experiments, we know that's from all of the silica that's in a piece of grass. Now, I'm not talking about the stuff in your yard, the big, tall, wild prairie grass, you know. A lot of silica in there, and any animal that eats that grass, their teeth wear down a lot, okay? So, we have archaeologists actually found one of these that had the handle on in a dry cave in Arkansas. And so, if you take a bunch of grass, gather it up, and you use this not like this, but as a saw, sort of, it cuts the grass. A sickle. S-I-C-K-L-E. Sickle. And so they work well. They actually, the incisors were out on this end, and they always break those off. Now, you can find deer jaws on other archaeological sites that still have that on there, and oftentimes these were used for scraping off green corn. Okay, but they don't show that typical wear from all the grass strands going between the teeth. While I was on the atlatls, here's another one, another style. This is an exact one found in a cave in Hogup Cave in Utah. There have been many styles of atlatls or spear throwers found out there. And again, you've got a weight. It's just a flat piece of slate tied on the back, a thin board, a little channel, a tiny hook. And in the archaeological report that I found this in, it had these wood splints, 2 on the front, 2 on the back. And I was in a real hurry to make my first atlatl, and since it didn't tell me why those were on there, I thought, well, I don't need them then. So I left them off. Well, in a few minutes, this thin board was hurting my hand, and there is a notch here, and this is the weakest point. So when you throw it, this thing bends, and most of the bend was occurring right here. So I had 2 situations I didn't like, and I thought, how am I going to solve those? And then I remembered the splints. Somebody probably made just a flat board. It hurt their hand. They noticed the weak spot, took a stick, split it, cut it into pieces, and just tied it on. A real fast fix. So, neat tool. Let's see, I should probably, this thing here, this is a ceremonial dagger, and there are like 72 of these found in a mound in Oklahoma on a site called spiral mounds in Oklahoma. Yes, sir.
What is the shiny stuff?
That is copper.
Cool.
And they did not go down to the store and buy a sheet of copper. They had somebody up in Michigan grabbed up some nuggets up there and traded these all the way down, brought them down here, and nobody at Spiral probably made these. These were probably made at Cahokia, because archaeologists have found copper workshops at Cahokia mounds. They don't find any of this stuff being made at Spiral Mound in Oklahoma. So they probably traded deer hides or something for these things. And this is a piece of red cedar. And the copper that they would beat these nuggets into sheets, and sometimes you'll find rivets in them, or they put two pieces together. We know they actually had red string on them. What happens? Anything that copper comes in contact with, it will be preserved. It'll be preserved because the copper salts kill bacteria, and it's bacteria that really make things rot. If you don't have any bacteria, things won't rot. Okay? So they actually found them, wood, the copper. The copper was sort of fragmented, but we could see the pattern, and the pattern is flake scars from, like if you chipped the spear point here. There are flake scars, and these are very stylized flake scars. So they use them in dance ceremonies. And in the same mound, they found these big shells with dancers on them, holding them in their hands. So they probably had some significance. We don't know what. Okay? So this is not a tool. It wasn't used for anything but maybe to, I don't know, used in a ceremony. Okay?
You say that's a replica, or is that an actual one? Okay.
The actual ones are all green, broken into pieces, and there's a big mound down there that everybody back in the 20s, I think, knew probably had all kinds of good stuff in it. And that was before there were many real archaeologists. So this guy rented this mound from the farmer, called all of his relic friends, and everybody showed up with the wheelbarrows and fistfuls of money. So he lit the dynamite, blew the mound up, and tossed away robes made out of rabbit skin, fur, and basket stuff, mats and stuff that you can't find, that was, from an information standpoint to an archaeologist, more important than stuff like this. So these, you can go to all over the East and find them in people's collection. The Museum of the American Indian has some that came in through a collection. There's a museum in Ohio that has one. Some of them were smaller. Most of them were. So, but it's just a ceremonial piece. Let's see.
About that bone thingy in front of the spear.
Bone thingy in front of a spear. Okay. But this is an ulna bone from a deer. And it just so happens, see, that's a joint. But it just so happens this makes a perfect handhold awls, and we find these. If they are very sharp pointed, they were probably for piercing holes in leather for sewing. If they are rounded, blunt, and polished, they were probably used for putting in between splints in a basket to put in another piece. And so I made mine sharp, so that's for puncturing leather. It was originally about this long, and you break some of it off. It's, you don't need that much. Okay, deer bone. A beaver tooth chisel. This is more of an Eskimo style, but almost everybody used beaver teeth for carving on wood, as did the beaver. You know, it wasn't too far away of an idea, and they work very well. Fishing. Okay. Most people probably use nets. We know the people of Florida use nets, big nets, because we find pieces of them with float pegs, shell anchors, and all kinds of stuff down there. But almost everybody probably used net. And the knot used in the nets from Florida are also made, the same knot made in nets to catch rabbits out in the Southwest. Most people all over the world use the same knot. In fact, the knot, being from Florida, we had Greek fishermen. They're just north of us, and for many years, up until machine nets came in, they used the same knot that most of these prehistoric people used for making a net. It's called a sheet band, and it's a knot that no matter how you pull on it, it won't slip out. A good knot. They also caught fish with hooks, because not many fish, especially some big ones, they're all by themselves, and it's easier to catch them on a hook. And they made them out of bone, and you can find these in Kansas, Nebraska, all over, and most of these were made from deer leg bones.
Wow, there's a lot of deer tools.
Yeah, they ate a lot of deer too. But yes, and they studied every piece of bone to figure out what can I make from that, and they always made some good choices. So you find them this big, you find many small ones. You even find them down in Florida, much bigger, about as big as a deer bone will allow. And some of those date back to, they've been dated back to about 7,000 years ago. So fish hooks haven't changed through time much, because some of the, you're going to find fish hooks made here in Kansas about 200 years ago, and they look the same as the 8,000 or 7,000 year old hook. Here's something that's really ingenious. This is a ice fishing decoy. Obviously not used in Florida, but Michigan, Minnesota, Iowa, Illinois, and have been a few found in Nebraska. Verify that. You can't go much further south and find these, because the ice is a little too thin. Okay, so how these were used is these were tied on a stick. You cut a hole in the ice, and you move this in the water and jig it up and down, and the fish comes up to inspect. We do the same thing. We use the fishing lures, spinners, and all kinds of shiny stuff, and they made them out of freshwater mussel. The inside had this nice pearly stuff inside, and so no hooks on them. I'm pretty sure that none of them had hooks, but they had a spear that had a point on it, and as the fish came up, they stabbed the fish and pulled it out. Now, you can find these made out of wood and some metal with lead in the bellies of them. We made them up through, I think there's some as late as the 1920s even, that Anglos and everyone else used. And In fact, I think some of the people up there in the ice fishing north used them up until recently. So anyway, a neat thing. Oh, and then here's something found in Florida. 15 of these have been found. Most of them have this part pulled out, and they find just the pieces. We're pretty sure they were fishing somehow, but we don't know how. Snagging, maybe. Probably not in the same method that those hooks were used. Okay, this is a piece of deer antler, and this is about 9/10 of a raccoon baculum bone or penis bone. The other end curved down that way. They broke that off. We don't know how they were used, but we found that they found probably, I think it's only 17 or 18 of them. And down there, people go diving in the rivers, and the muck and stuff preserve bone down there a lot because it shuts off the oxygen. And for something to rot, you need three things. Oxygen, well, first of all, bacteria, oxygen, and water. If you deny the bacteria oxygen or water, they can't survive. And so down there, there's almost no oxygen. So a lot of this stuff survives underwater. They even found underwater down there a totem pole that was about this big around, 8-10 feet long. They found all types of big wooden carvings, and so there are several ways that things can be preserved, but they're not preserved very often.
All the fishing.
This thing here?
No, that
that hook.
Yeah. I don't know what to call it because.
Oh, I lost it. Where is it?
Near the jello.
Near the jello. Oh, yeah, there. Thank you very much. This?
Yeah, what do you call it?
This is from a deer, a fish hook, probably.
Okay.
This is from a deer, and that's from a raccoon.
Yeah.
Bones, okay? All right. If we stop talking, I could go on forever here. So if you have questions, ask them. If not, you can come up and play with the stuff here. And or anyone, oh, I did bring a piece of rawhide that was used and a piece of sinew, and you can see how it's real easy to pull off threads from this. It's very strong stuff, real strong. And if you take a circular piece of hide, you can make out of this a piece of cordage about that wide and probably about 4 feet long. So if you used a big, a whole hide, you know, I mean, you can make a long piece. So that's how they made long pieces out of a fairly small animal. Okay.
What's that for?
Well, you make string, and this here is rawhide, same as this, and you soak it in some water. It gets soft, and you wrap it on. It dries, and then I coat the whole thing with the hide glue, and it just makes one sleeve around there, and so you can chop and chop and chop, and it takes a long time for this to come loose. So it fit.
Do you have any war weapons?
No, I don't like war, so I don't have any weapons.
Do you like Facebook?
I'm sorry?
Do you like to be on Facebook?
I don't know how. Sorry.
They got some good games on there.
Oh, do they? Okay, fine.
Really good.
Okay. I also made a dugout canoe. And it was, what, 12 feet long, 2 feet in diameter. And that worked really well. And that was when I lived in Indiana. My wife worked at Angel Mounds. We needed a project, and somebody brought a log and all these tools, thinking we're gonna burn it out and chop it out. And you don't need any tools. All you need is some mud, a stick, and fire, and that's all you need. And the fire burns it perfectly smooth as long as you watch it. And it turned out very well. Anyway.
It just sounds like it.
I was wondering what those two tools over there were against the wall.
Oh my gosh, I forgot I had these. Yeah. Now we're getting into Kansas and the here. Okay, Kansas, Oklahoma, Texas, the Dakotas are home to bison scapula hoes. Okay, scapula is a shoulder blade. Okay, you know what that is? Do you have a shoulder blade?
Yeah.
2 of them, don't you?
Yeah, I'm trying to look at it so I can get a good drawing.
Oh, okay. So this is one way of hafting a scapula to make a hoe, and these work. And the ones in the book there's a report that was made in 1909 or something about the Hidatsa Indians, not the Jewish organization. Hidatsa. So the Hidatsa, Arikara, and the Mandans lived along the Missouri River, and in the floodplain there, they grew their corn and their squash and a bunch of other stuff, but they also were bison hunters. And so this was a tool that the woman made up for this guy's dissertation that turned into this report. That is a rake. Okay? And so this is made out of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 young trees. And I thought, now, how would they bend this in an economical manner? And so I finally figured out a real easy way that they could have done it. I took some wooden stakes and 2 logs, and I wedged these ends down in there, and I then bent them over, spread them out, tied them with rope, set a cement block on them so they weren't bent, and they could have used a stake and a string and stuff.
That one?
Just a minute. And so this is rawhide, and all rawhide, and so I made this last year. And in fact, I made 2 of them. I sold a bunch of these things here to the Indiana State Museum, who now has an exhibit on corn. So I have a bunch of things there. And then coming to the plains, you find this tool. This is a tibia bone out of a bison. And that's this big bone right there. When you crack your shin on something, you crack your tibia on something, okay? And the digging stick was one of the most important tools for gardening, digging roots up and so forth. But you know, the soils out in the plains, they get pretty hard and dry out. So they took the tibia, cut off a big chunk of it, sliced it here, ground this edge down sharp, drilled a hole in the end, and they shoved a stick in it. And if you put a much bigger stick and longer, I mean, you get some force behind that thing and dig a hole, dig up some roots, dig storage pits if you have to.
Dig giant tunnel?
You could, I guess.
So those are technically shovels?
Digging sticks. Something we don't use. Natives did. We use shovels, but they use digging sticks. And oh, before I stop, one other tool. This is a hoe, stone hoe. This is a type that was used by the Mississippian Indians around Cahokia Mounds and all up and down the Mississippi River at about 900 to 1200 years ago. And we never put a handle on them. Pieces here, ranging in size from about like that. I've seen some this big. So archaeologists, in trying to interpret these things many years ago, they put these long handles on them, like our European style hoes nowadays. Well, you get that much weight out there, and before long, you want to go in the house and watch TV. That's too much work because it gets too heavy. About 10 years ago, they were digging a site near Cahokia, and they found this statuette of a woman hoeing her garden. Her garden was the head of a serpent, and the serpent wound around her. The tail went up the back and turned into a gourd vine, had gourds on it. And how was she hoeing her garden? On her knees, with this type of hoe blade and a real short handle with two hands. So just think of the calluses on your knees back then, ladies, if you lived back then. It was a woman. Women did the gardening. So anyway, and this will dig a hole. It's a great dirt adze, but they use them for cultivating their fields. We know that because almost everybody that farms corn in a floodplain finds little sandy rises out in the floodplain plain, because that's easy to work. It's easy for plants to grow there. And when you walk out on those today, after a field has been plowed, you will find shiny flakes out there. And these things become polished. I've seen some of them that looks like there's 10 coats of varnish on them. And that's from digging in the soil, but it's not necessarily from the soil. It's from these little things that come out of grass, and corn is a grass called opal phytolus. And these things, when they are struck, if you can see it, there's a little spark and there's heat there, and it just blazes this whole thing over. And they would sharpen these, evidently out there in the fields. They'd knock some flakes off, and so we find the concentration of those highly polished flakes, small ones, out there. So we know that that's where they grew their corn stuff. So I guess I better stop talking. I don't want anybody to fall asleep.
What was that one right there?
Which one? This?
Yeah, that one.
That's a hoe.
Ah.
Yeah. That's a hoe. So if you want to come up and, Well, there is something else. I can't just keep talking, but I'll open up this thing of bone hairpins. A lot of places made bone hairpins out of the long bones of deer, ending in different shapes and everything, and some of them were incised with coloring, and these are all deer bones, leg bones. And I've got some here to show you how that was done. Here's a leg bone, these nice straight leg bones out of deer. You take a piece of flint, tie it to a stick, and you groove it back and forth until you cut all the way through. And here is your bone blank. And then you rub that on a piece of sandstone, grind it down, and then you polish it. It took an hour or two.
Tell us about the gourd kittle leg.
Okay. These are all the way from Texas up into the Dakotas. These things are. And we usually find only the pieces. And I got to do some more research on these. I don't think they use just pieces. I think because of the grooves through time, they just got broken. And from some research that's been done, not by me, and one, was it a Pawnee house? One of these things was found with a jar. And I use a gourd because the museum in Johnson, Kansas didn't want to pay for a big pottery bowl and kids handling it, dropping it. It wouldn't last that long. So I said, well, gourds will do the same thing. We think these are used to imitate sound. So, and you find out how a bison sounds if you don't have any bison around. You go to YouTube. And type in bison noise, bison roar, something like that, and you'd be surprised how many people have recorded the sounds of a bison. Most of them out. Is that a bison? Most of them are from being out in Yellowstone or someplace. And if you go on there and you find those and listen to them, you'll be surprised that you will find this. That noise right there is this big old bison. Now, you can a resonating chamber, just like the empty space in a guitar or something, you know. And who knows? They probably had it in some type of ceremony or maybe a musical thing, but this sounds just like an old bison. There are a couple of really good ones on YouTube.
Use it to attract bison when hunting.
Maybe. We don't know, but that's a good idea.
Use it to attract, you know, like wolves or something, because it's an old bison.
Well, maybe so. Yeah, maybe so. Yeah. Yeah. We don't know. Those are all good ideas. Okay. So you all probably want to go home now. If you want to come up, pick anything up, you may.